If it's Friday, a blockbuster jobs report and a contracting economy, why lawmakers, consumers, economists, and political strategists everywhere are trying to figure out what the heck is going on with this post-COVID economy. Plus, Democrats inch closer to another legislative win, looking to add to their week-long winning streak and defy November expectations. The number 2 Senate Democrat Dick Durbin will join me up ahead. And China ramps up its retaliation over Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Now, they've cut off any dialogue with the United States on military and climate matters amid ongoing live-fire military drills. Where this conflict is heading next, that's ahead. Happy Friday and welcome to another edition of Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. It is the most important issue for voters. It always is. It also happens to be the most confusing issue right now. What am I referring to? The economy. Jobs growth unexpectedly surged last month as employers added more than 500,000 jobs, double what experts predicted. And these are people who make a living making those predictions. The unemployment rate fell to 3.5%. By the way, if you think this is just a weird report, they actually, the jobs numbers were revised upward in previous months. So this is kind of a weird economy. The economy, you have a job market that's hot. You have an economy that's actually contracting, according to one traditional, and the White House is now arguing outdated measure, that we're in a recession because it's been 2 straight quarters of declining GDP. And of course, with consumer demand still hot, you might assume Americans would be feeling better about the economy, but they're not. Consumer confidence, which also means voter confidence, in our economy is, by some measures, at its lowest point since the misery of the COVID shutdowns. But with demand broadly and stubbornly outpacing supply, policymakers have found themselves stuck in an endless game of whack-a-mole. Soaring prices, inflation, and supply chain issues, and they seem to continue to impact each other. The result? There's broad concern that the only real way out of this mess, and is the Federal Reserve, is to cure 9% inflation, is to simply trigger a significant slowdown. So in that respect, the good news of 500,000 jobs gained in 1 month is viewed by some as kind of bad news because it's not sluggish at all. And that means the Fed is likely going to keep raising interest rates aggressively until things start to find an equilibrium. And yet, one of the biggest drivers of inflation, energy prices, have been falling in anticipation of a slowdown. Gas prices have plummeted nearly 90 cents in roughly 50 days. So, if you're confused, you're not alone. But if you're looking for easy to understand clues from investors, keep looking. The market's reaction to today's amazing jobs number was basically flat. Bottom line, there's a lot of uncertainty and confusion about the actual state of this economy and the future prospects for millions of workers and voters struggling to make a living. It's that struggle that President Biden made a point of addressing today when he discussed this better-than-expected jobs report.
I know people will hear today's extraordinary jobs report and say they don't see it, they don't feel it in their own lives. I know how hard it is. I know it's hard to feel good about job creation when you already have a job and you're dealing with rising prices, food and gas and so much more. I get it. I literally can remember sitting at my mom and dad's dining room table and watching them choose which bills they're going to pay that month because there wasn't enough money to pay all the bills. I get it.
Joining me now, CNBC senior White House correspondent Kayla Tauscher. So, Kayla, it was interesting to see the White House try to both meet voters where they're at when it comes to this economy and also try to sort of beat back what the Republican messaging has been about the economy. It said, hey, this is a terrible economy. And Biden's going, hey, but look at my job growth.
Sure. And Chuck, I mean, this is a double-edged sword if there ever was one for the administration. On one hand, job growth, as you mentioned, unquestionably strong. Nearly every single demographic across the board was enjoying not only job but also wage gains in the prior month. But there are 2 issues with this number. Number one, the more people you have working and making more money, the more people who want to spend that money. They're putting it back into the economy, which is normally a good thing, but it's that surging demand that drives inflation. So that is why the Federal Reserve is now going to have to be, according to many economists, raising interest rates even sharper or perhaps just as aggressively as it has been for the last several months. The other issue with this number is just how surprised everybody was. Double expectations from traditional models just show how difficult it is in a pandemic era when you still have supply chain issues and you still have really difficult indicators to read, how hard it is for the White House to actually predict where the economy is going. Today, the press secretary was adamant that there is not a recession, but when I spoke to many White House officials behind the scene, they acknowledged that they were very surprised by this figure. And even though this is a lagging indicator because it tells us what happened for the prior 30 days, Chuck, it just tells us that there's a question about what happens from here and how good these models and these forecasts are about whether the White House is going to be right on that point.
Look, I'm going to bring in some economists that have been trained for decades on this question, but the hardest thing to sort of comprehend here is the massive job growth that took place in the same quarter that this economy contracted.
Sure, and that's one of the reasons why the White House says there is not a recession, that the labor market is simply too strong for there to be one, and that one of the reasons why we saw at least the headline number on gross domestic product be negative is because consumers were buying more from overseas than the U.S. was shipping to other countries. In other words, the U.S. consumer is so much stronger than consumer counterparts in other countries over in Europe and Asia. And certainly that is a good thing. But there's also a psychological issue here, Chuck, and whether we can talk ourselves into a recession, whether people read the headlines and they start to pull back their spending, they start to save more, they start to feel worse about the economy and their own personal position. And that also has a real impact on what happens from here as well.
Yeah, it's odd, Kayla. It's like we still have high consumer demand and we have negative consumer sentiment at the same time. It's another thing that's fully hard to comprehend. But hey, you and I aren't economists full time. I'm about to get a couple that are. So Kayla,
we just play them on TV.
Exactly. Kayla, as always, particularly for my big economic days, always appreciate your help. Let me bring in a couple of trained economists to give us their best take on where we are right now. Diana Swank, chief economist for KPMG, and she's advised the Congressional Budget Office, Council of Economic Advisors, and Austin Goolsbee, a former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Obama. Diane, let me just ask it this way. How weird is this economy?
It can't get much worse. It is really weird, but I think it really is important to understand why the majority of Americans feel we're in a recession, even though from an economist standpoint, this isn't technically a recession because consumption, employment, and production are still rising. The reason they feel it is not only have they lost ground to inflation, they've lost all the ground that they gained as the economy reopened when wages surged and then some. So they really are losing ground on their living standards. So in their mind, they are losing ground. It's a recession, even though it's not what we think of as a traditional recession. And it really gets to the issue of how corrosive high inflation is, how hard it is on families. We've even seen defaults already rise among low-income households who no longer can afford to pay their bills when they were already sort of going paycheck to paycheck. And then on top of it, we saw in this month, they took on more jobs. We saw more multiple job holders, the highest level since February 2020. For me, that's a sign of economic stress, not economic well-being.
Austin, is there any precedent to this? If you look at it, what are we on our sort of the modern economy, our 12th or 13th business cycle? This is really an unprecedented thing we've ever seen, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And it follows the COVID recession was unlike any previous recession. Things that normally lead the recession actually went up. People bought more houses, more cars, more consumer durables. Usually that goes down. And what drove the recession was a bunch of recession-proof things like going to the dentist and personal services and stuff like that. So now we're trying to process how can you have an unemployment rate of 3.5%, but you're still adding 500,000 jobs in a single month? There's never been anything like that. I think it must have to do with what you're saying there, Chuck, that this is just an unprecedented time, and you had all of these people that were out of the labor force, driven there by COVID, and now they're coming back. So we're going to just have to see. You got to have some sympathy for the Fed, because it's not that easy to figure out where we are in normal business cycle terms, because this doesn't look anything like it normally does.
Well, Diana, it gets me actually the question I wanted for both of you is, look, the Fed has one tool, and that's really all. Well, I guess they have two. They can print money, and they can raise interest rates. Is this the right prescription?
Well, the Fed can't grow food and they can't pump oil, so that is a problem. They can't deal with an economy where demand is outpacing a supply-constrained world. The only way to deal with it is to hammer demand very crudely. And they think of inflation almost like a cancer. If you don't deal with it now, it can metastasize and become something much more chronic, like the 1970s. That was a decades-long inflation and took really severe recessions to break the back of. They hope that they can do this with a little bit of an increase in the unemployment rate. That is their hope. That said, even the little bit of the increase in the unemployment rate that they're talking about would constitute a recession from where we are today.
But Austin, I want to get at that. We added 500,000 jobs and the labor participation rate went down.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If you look at the numbers, this is bonkersville. Like that doesn't happen in a normal business cycle. If people are getting hired in the hundreds of thousands, that's enticing a bunch of people back into the labor force. Now, there is some component that is demographic, that over the last 5 years and definitely over the next 5 years, the baby boomers are retiring. We're going to have a lot of people moving out of the labor force. So we probably shouldn't expect participation to go back to the levels that it was 25 years ago when we had that coming through the pipe. But that said, there are still puzzles. There are real strengths, and the job market has basically been the strongest part of the economy. But there's also some real weaknesses. Kind of how Diane said, you've got real wages, that is wage growth minus inflation. You've had negative real wage growth for big chunks of the middle class. And consumer sentiment, as you laid out in the previous segment, is epically bad. People are in really bad moods. And yet the divergence between people are asked, how's the economy? They say it's as bad as they've ever said it was. But how's your personal position? They say it's okay. So the difference between their personal position and what they say about the economy has also never been bigger.
I go back. It feels, Diane, let me ask you this, the workforce issue. Are we better off in order to try to find an equilibrium, just basically letting more immigrant labor in? I mean, do we simply have too many job openings for the amount of people we have in this country to fill them?
Well, we certainly do. I mean, we're running job openings. Even as they cooled in June, they're still at 10.3 million when we've got, less than 6 million people looking for jobs. That's a big gap. So that's important. But I think much more important is also, in addition to the immigration issues, which I think are very, very key, we've lost a lot of immigration in the United States, and that was what was holding up growth in our prime age labor force. But we also have long COVID. That is taking a toll on participation by our prime age workers. And any given month, in the month of July, we had 60% more people who were out sick during the month than during any average month in the 2010s. That is because of the infections that we're seeing, again, from Omicron. Those continual infections and long COVID are adding to labor staffing shortages and the costs of what it is to run a business. And that's adding to inflation even when wages aren't outpacing the overall inflation rate.
Austin, compare our economy to the other Western economies, maybe the other members of the G20, if you will. Just from my perch, it certainly looks like we're a bit more resilient than some of these others. But are other economies going to hit recession before we do if we end up in one?
We might. This is an important area. In a way, if I told you the U.S. is going to have 9% CPI inflation for the last year, what would happen to the dollar? You would say the dollar's probably going to collapse if we have that high of inflation. But in fact, the dollar hasn't collapsed. It's gone way up because the U.S. is stronger. Its outlook is stronger and better than most of the other countries. Though I want to caution everybody, I don't think that we've had a recession in the first 6 months. I thought the argument about GDP going down when you're adding this kind of jobs, that's not a recession. But the Fed is the most common cause of recession in the United States. It's caused more than 2/3 of the recessions by raising rates faster than the economy can handle. And we're raising rates as fast, really, as we have ever raised them. It took them 3 months to raise rates this time, what took 3 years in the last rate raising cycle. So we could enter a recession. Right now, we look stronger than the rest of the world. But if they're going to tighten rates at that kind of speed, we could stumble rapidly.
And some might argue it might be and you hate to say it, is it the only choice we have? That's something nobody wants to say. Nobody and hopes that isn't the answer. Anyway, Diane and Austin, I feel smarter about this, so I appreciate having a couple experts like yourselves on the show. So thank you. Up next, Democrats close out their best week in a while, at least politically. Could this legislative blue streak color the November midterms? Top Senate Democrat, number 2 Senate Democrat, Dick Durbin, joins me next. Plus, the latest retaliation from China after Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, and the latest response from the White House. You're watching Meet the Press now.
What will Votorama be like? It'll be like hell. They deserve this. As much as I admire Joe Manchin and Sinema for standing up to the radical left at times, they're empowering legislation that will make the average person's life more difficult.
Welcome back. That was Senator Lindsey Graham this morning with his warning for Democrats as they prepare to put what they call the Inflation Reduction Act on the Senate floor tomorrow. It's a bill that's mostly about energy, prescription drugs, and deficit reduction. Republicans say they're going to do whatever they can to stop this bill, but it can pass with a simple majority. And with Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema now on board, Democrats appear to have the votes they need to get this done. Sinema's cooperation came at the expense of a major tax provision funding the bill, one that would have closed what's called a loophole, if you will, that allows many top hedge fund earners to pay a reduced rate. But the bill may have landed in a better place for many Democrats because it replaced that lost tax revenue with a tax on stock buybacks, and it actually may bring in more revenue for deficit reduction. So if the bill passes, it would be the third major legislative win for the Democrats just in the last 2 weeks, largely, by the way, without too much help, it appears, from the White House. So joining me now, Democratic Senator from Illinois, Dick Durbin, the number 2 leader in the Senate for the Democrats. Senator Durbin, always good to see you. So let me start with what got traded in and out on the tax provision. You sort of, I feel like it sounds like you morally don't like the carried interest loophole. But where are you today with where they came out?
Well, I think it's a good compromise. The carried interest loophole is impossible to defend. People are getting a tax break. They're getting their income treated as a capital gain without risking any capital. That's just not what the tax code is supposed to be about. But I'll tell you, putting a tax on the stock buybacks, it's about time. And we're going to raise even more revenue than we had under the carried interest loophole closure. So I think it's a step in the right direction. The wealthiest people who are making the most money in our economy will pay slightly more, and it'll discourage some bad conduct.
You're still waiting for, I always love using this phrase, and only in Washington phrase, you're still waiting for the bird bath to be completed for this bill. And I guess one of the provisions that I think could be tricky has to do with the prescription drug benefit issue here. What are you most concerned about with the parliamentarian that could alter it, that suddenly makes the prescription drug part less impactful?
We have our fingers crossed because politicians of both political parties have been promising for a generation or more that we're going to do something about prescription drug pricing. And American families are saying to us, part of the problem with inflation is prescription drugs as well as the cost of health insurance. Well, our bill attacks both of them, brings them down for seniors and for other Americans. So we've got to go through this final procedural hurdle. There's no way to know how the parliamentarian will ultimately rule, but we think we have it written in a fashion that will allow many of us who've made this promise over the years keep it.
What is that issue that could make it not? I mean, what's the precarious piece of this, if you don't mind getting into it?
Well, in the most general terms, it's a question whether it's a financial provision or a policy provision. And I've been through this so many different times. There are different ways to skin a cat. And I think we've given the parliamentarian a substantial amount of time because this is a complex measure. And she's going to do her best and do it professionally. And I hope she finds, as we believe she will, that the American families and seniors in particular need a break when it comes to prescription drugs.
Let me... There is something you have lost in reconciliation on in the past, but I'm wondering if the current economic reports give you a better shot the next time, and that is some immigration reform. You've tried a few times to see if you could get immigration reform provisions into reconciliation packages. And there's always, it's really not met the financial test, is my understanding of it, in the simplest terms. But the fact that we have this bizarre economy that essentially doesn't have enough labor, right? We are short labor here. Is there a way you could come back and make the budgetary argument for immigration reform?
Well, I tell you what, I really threw in the towel after spending all of last year trying to achieve that goal. I just came to the conclusion that reconciliation as we currently know it is not going to be the proper vehicle. But that doesn't mean we should walk away from immigration reform. We need to have stability at our border. We need to have an orderly process. We don't have it today. We need to have a process where the people who are needed in our workforce, and there are many, think of agricultural workers as an obvious one, need to have a path to get through the morass of entry into the United States in a proper legal manner. I find more and more Republicans who say, of course, Durbin, you're right about that. Well, we've got to bring them together, and I hope we can start in September with a conversation of how to achieve that. We're not going to do comprehensive reform. It's more than we can achieve in the rest of this year. But remaining elements of bringing in key workers make a difference. My colleague Tammy Duckworth has a provision that will help us recruit more people who currently don't have citizenship status but can qualify for a green card if they're accepted into the military and pass all the tests, ultimately leading to their citizenship. We have a need for healthcare workers at every possible level to come into this country, and we should be changing the immigration law to accommodate that. And I mentioned the farm workers. That's a bipartisan effort that passed handily in the House of Representatives. So things we can do in immigration, not with reconciliation, but in a manner that I think serves our economy.
I think if you just call it the Immigration and Inflation Reduction Act. I have kid, but the issue of immigrant labor is impacting our current inflationary situation. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Though there is one other immigration-related question I have for you. Senator Menendez kind of issued a bit of a threat to his fellow Democrats that if during the vote-a-rama, perhaps Title 42 or some other what might be considered controversial immigration measures that amendments that Republicans offer, that may lure a couple of embattled 2022 Democrats to vote for it, that his vote for reconciliation, is on the line. Are Democrats going to stay united in this vote-a-rama?
Well, Chuck Schumer has made it clear to the caucus, and I believe that overwhelmingly they agree with him. Our policy is basically no amendments. We have a bill that, when it's cleared by the parliamentarian, is going to make a big difference in deficit reduction, inflation reduction, reduction in the cost of prescription drugs, as well as health care premiums, just to name a few. And I haven't even touched the area of environmentalism, and that's a major portion as well. And he said, if we get into give and take with amendments, who knows what this final package will look like. So we start with the premise that we're going to try to pass a clean bill in the Senate, no matter how many amendments are offered by the other side.
And then finally, the situation in China. China chose to be outraged by the speaker's visit. A lot of your colleagues go to Taiwan. This is not an infrequent stop for elected officials in this country. What's China's decision to do this? Where do you see this going? And are we suddenly in a situation where maybe China invading Taiwan is more real than we realize?
Well, I certainly hope not. We live in a dangerous world, and I don't want to see it more dangerous. But I will tell you this. I think that part of this is full outrage on the part of the Chinese. We have a situation where our feelings have been known about Taiwan for decades, for generations. Delegation after delegation has visited Taiwan without murmur from the Chinese. And in this situation, I actually went with Nancy Pelosi years ago to China. They knew her position on the human rights outrages in China at the time. So this is no surprise visit or no surprise position from her. I think they are making some noise, and I hope that's all it turns out to be. But we cannot let the Chinese have a clearinghouse to determine where Americans, particularly elected officials, can travel safely in this world.
Yeah, that's for sure. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate. As always, sir, thanks for coming on, sharing your perspective.
Good to be with you, Chuck.
Up next, traditionally August is a bad month for the White House. But so far, this first week of August has been perhaps the best stretch this White House has had in months. Panel is here next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we've said, Democrats just racked up perhaps their best week of headlines in a long time, killing the al-Qaeda leader, passing a bill to help veterans exposed to toxic burn pits that Republicans decided to make an issue of, Kansas vote proving the power of the abortion issue, add to that falling gas prices, booming jobs report, finally getting 50 senators on board a reconciliation bill. COVID's been very good to Joe Biden, no pun intended there. So Democrats are still facing a stormy political environment. They may have crafted themselves a fairly sturdy umbrella, though, heading into November. But looking beyond the midterms, NBC has some new reporting that President Joe Biden's donors are a bit antsy, worried about his reelection chances, and that many big money contributors would prefer a different nominee in 2024. But they're going to stick with Biden for now because they believe he would have the best chance if the opponent is Trump. Joining me now, national political correspondent Meredith McGraw, Republican strategist Doug Heye, and Center for American Progress Action Fund President Navin, Nyak. Meredith, it's hard to, this is literally Biden's best week, perhaps since the first 2 months of the administration.
It is. As you outlined, he took down a terrorist in Afghanistan. He has great job numbers coming out today. This reconciliation bill, getting Manchin and Sinema on board. He has a lot of things that he should be feeling pretty good about. Somebody did note that it was too bad that he did have COVID during the assassination of that terrorist. He missed out on one of those very famous photo ops that, President Obama and President Trump and presidents before him have had. But we'll have to see if he can move this momentum and maybe see an improvement in his approval numbers that have still been so abysmal for him.
Well, Navin, I think that's the question. Is he presiding over a good week, or is he the cause of the good week?
I think he'll get a lot of credit because the president gets credit for whatever is happening here. And I think in this case, it really is not even just for President Biden, no question, the best week in maybe his presidency or the first 2 months. But when's the last time you've seen any Congress and administration get this much done in such a short time and on the things that the American people care about, right? The Inflation Reduction Act. They're making huge investment in manufacturing. They're doing something about closing gun loopholes. Like, they really are. The productivity has been truly off the charts.
Is it all about procrastinating until the end, though, too? So you turn in all your papers on the last day?
Isn't that the way this place works all the time, unfortunately?
Conversely, Doug, this has been probably the worst week the Republicans have had since the start of this midterm cycle. It's a party that doesn't look united. You got this sort of Trump situation that is, if you squint one way, you're like, maybe Trump's grip is loosening, but it's still the most dominant thing. Abortion clearly is a bigger problem. And then there was the self-inflicted wound of picking a fight with Jon Stewart. Right? It just wasn't a good 7 days.
Yeah, I'll say full disclosure, I worked for Richard Burr, who voted for the bill, fortunately. So with that caveat laid out from North Carolina, this has been a bad week for Republicans, but what we don't know yet is what it ultimately means. And we're going to have to see more polling about exactly what happened and why in Kansas for whether or not Democrats really should be enthusiastic about that or Republicans should really be doomed about it. But also, what does this change in the trajectory for Joe Biden? And what does it mean for right track, wrong track, where his numbers are completely underwater, and also his approval rating? When I was at the RNC in 2010, our magic number for Obama was 46. We felt if he was at or below that in the 10-day kind of run-up, we'd take back the House. And he was at 44, 45 in every poll. Biden's still well below that. And this week isn't getting him to 45. If it gets him to 42, that's a big win, I think.
I actually think that the dynamics around that have changed so much over time in that the generic ballot is shifting so much, and Biden's approval hasn't moved yet. I just think we're overestimating.
Well, that's what's fascinating. Why do you think it's detached?
Well, I think part of the reason, and this is a bit of what you're getting to, the MAGA extremists have taken over the Republican Party. And what is the conversation about Republicans? It's about Dr. Oz. It's about Doug Mastriano. It's about Blake Master. It's about Herschel Walker. That is the Republican Party today, and that's the conversation that I think is shaping things.
You know, Meredith, he brought up 2010, and he brought up the president's job rating. You know what didn't happen in 2010? George W. Bush didn't barnstorm the country in September, October of 2010, reminding people of what they didn't like in the previous administration. Donald Trump's going to be doing that.
Donald Trump is doing that. I mean, at a moment where a lot of Republicans feel like they should have all momentum behind them in terms of the economy, Biden's approval numbers, what they're seeing is the GOP have success with candidates who are backed by Trump, are continuing to talk about the 2020 election, and election lies at a moment where they could be talking about President Biden. They could be talking about the economy, literally anything but President Trump. And yet that is still the focus in so many ways.
Let's talk about the abortion earthquake in Kansas. Doug, can you tell me what the definitive pro-life position is in the Republican Party right now?
By and large, it's absolute with no incest or rape exemption, which is a far cry from where it was under, say, George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan even. We have moved as far to the right on abortion as Democrats have to the left. Neither place is where I think the country is, but it's the laws that have changed that have obviously caused these reactions, especially with voter registration. I think the voter demos, when we see everything that's reported out on what happened in Kansas, is going to be fascinating and a big roadmap potentially for November.
Navin, you know, before the Dobbs decision, it was Republicans. You know, you go to Nevada, they were winning the voter registration game. Georgia, Florida, it's been ugly in the voter registration. Are you seeing any turnaround on this since Dobbs?
Well, Kansas is certainly the first place where everyone was like, wow, holy cow, all these young women registered, and now we know why, what was happening. I think this is, I actually think the part of the problem here is not just that Roe got overturned, but Republicans have opened the door very clearly that, hey, if we get in power, we're passing a national ban on abortion. And that,
by the way, speaking of Mitch McConnell, who very rarely makes mistakes, that is something you got to think he wish he reeled back in.
Even if you're a voter in California where you think you're protected, you have to now feel like, holy cow, if Mitch McConnell becomes majority leader, that's at risk.
You know, it's one of those things, it's a weird unforced error by him.
Yeah, and, you know, I think Democrats continue to have a lot of success with college-educated white voters who, you know, might be disillusioned by the economy, but they might go to the polls come November thinking about abortion, thinking about some of these other issues, and that could end up being a slight advantage to Democrats.
I want to end our conversation with what's going to be, to me, one of the ads of the cycle, and maybe for history, even if it has no impact at all. Dick Cheney on Donald Trump. I mean, let's just play it.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He is a coward. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters. He lost his election, and he lost big.
I'm not going to pretend I don't know what kind of impact this will have in Wyoming. I don't think any of us know if Dick Cheney has the same resonance and all this stuff, but boy, it's a pretty powerful thing that the former Vice President of the United States went after a former President of the United States like that.
Yeah, and look, this is not about the primary, even though that's what the ad, it doesn't mention the primary, doesn't mention the opponent. This is about 2024. This is about the Republican Party moving forward, whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful there.
I think the thing that actually is amazing is that it stood out in part because no one's doing it. Not only because he's the vice president, but you have so few Republicans.
Jeb Bush isn't doing it. George W. Bush isn't doing it, but Dick Cheney is.
Yeah, and I don't know if it becomes a roadmap where more Republicans who do disagree with where Trump is and where the party's going want to say something, but it's so rare that that's also part of what's so striking about it.
I will say, in talking to people around Trump, they loved this ad. They, of course, are all in for Harriet, and her poll numbers right now, she's trouncing Cheney. So they see this as a win for them.
Is this battle or war, though? Are they winning a battle or are they winning a war?
That's a great question.
Right? Like
unknowable.
Yeah.
You know, I joke, is she Obi-Wan Kenobi? Does she become more powerful? You know, you strike her down? Mm-hmm.
She's so coy about the 2024 question.
She is?
Yeah. So coy.
I'm sorry. I don't find her that coy. It seems pretty obvious where she's going, right? Like, I mean, if your whole goal, you believe, not only does he not belong in the Oval Office, but you're trying to somebody's got to take the fight to him, and she seems to be willing to be that fighter.
Completely.
All right, guys. It's been a good week to talk politics, that's for sure. Meredith, Doug, Navin, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Up next, we got a lot more midterm politics, by the way, if you want to keep talking about what happened Tuesday. Latest episode of the Chuck Toddcast, where I spoke with former Senator John Danforth about what's happening in Missouri. Put it this way, he is not done trying to fight what's left of the Missouri Republican Party. Up next, China's saber rattling is getting louder. How worried should the United States be, particularly our West Coast? You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The backlash from China over Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan continues to escalate, even days after Pelosi left the island. Last night, China's ambassador to the United States published an op-ed further condemning Pelosi's trip and accusing the United States of violating the One China policy. Today, China announced yet another retaliatory measure, saying that they will stop the already limited cooperation with the United States in a number of areas, including canceling dialogue between regional military commanders and even working with the two countries on the issues of climate. China also announced sanctions against Pelosi and her family, though that gesture is seen as mostly symbolic. In response, the United States summoned the Chinese ambassador to the White House this morning to lodge a formal diplomatic protest over China's provocations and to reiterate that the United States does not seek or want to see a crisis in the region. But concerns about China's live fire drills go beyond just the military aspects of it. Airlines have canceled flights to Taipei and rerouted others to avoid the airspace. And while cargo ships and oil tankers are also being rerouted around the island to avoid China's Navy. So how serious is this? And are we seeing actually a prelude to something much more aggressive from China going forward? I'm joined now by Bonnie Lin, director of the China Power Project at the Center for Strategic International Studies. She, of course, participated in our war game scenario over Taiwan, which you can catch on Meet the Press Reports. So, Bonnie, 24 hours ago, it looked like China was just going through a series of diplomatic little, gestures that they wanted to make. They were going to make their point, and it seemed to me that they're going to, at some point, okay, they've made their point and they'll move on. Today, it still doesn't feel like they're ready to move on. Is this a new posture?
Thank you, Chuck, for having me. So what you're saying today is still the unfolding of Chinese responses. So even if in the next couple of days we see China stop escalating, I think we'll likely see a new status quo moving forward. So let me unpack that a little bit. With respect to Taiwan, the new status quo we'll likely see is that it will be normal for China to operate beyond the median line that separates the Taiwan Strait, and it will be normal, or at least China's trying to normalize, operating above and much closer to Taiwan. With respect to the United States, you mentioned some of the Chinese reactions or responses to the United States, but it's actually quite restrained. So, for example, the targeting of Speaker Pelosi and her family, it is new in terms of she's still a sitting U.S. official, but it's not new in terms of how China has responded to other former Trump-era officials. Mm-hmm. In terms of the 8 countermeasures that China announced against the United States, with the exception of 2 of the defense talks, most of the areas of cooperation that China is suspending, we weren't actually making much progress anyway.
Right. Yeah. Let me ask you this, though. When you say this new status quo, is there anything we should be doing in response to prevent a new status quo?
So I think right now, in the near term, it's best to let China play out the next couple of days until the end of its military exercise, which currently the declared end is still August 7th. If we take any significant measures now to try to challenge China's military exercise, given the fact that already many Chinese citizens felt that China did not do enough to stop Pelosi from arriving in Taiwan, if we do anything now, it would likely escalate the situation. But after this exercise wraps up, I think we could probably do a lot more in terms of countering China if they want another repeat of these types of activities.
What do you expect? Because you sort of hinted something I was about to ask in this next question, which is simply, I assume that that's exactly what the U.S. wants to do. Let China play this out, give them their space to sort of have, to lodge their protests, finish this military exercise. But do you expect, for instance, a new round of of weapons being sent to Taiwan in the next 3 to 6 months?
The next 3 to 6 months, I'm not sure, but given the rate in which we have been supporting Taiwan, I wouldn't be surprised if we continued to either announce weapon sales or new activity to support Taiwan. I mean, it's very likely that in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll have more congressional visits to Taiwan.
Right.
So a lot of the activities that China were complaining about, I don't see the United States, at least in the near term, really changing our support for Taiwan.
What do you make of the South Korean president's decision to not get photographed with Speaker Pelosi?
I think he did it in a very diplomatic way in terms of being on vacation or pre-scheduled vacation. So I wouldn't personally regard that as a snub of Speaker Pelosi, but it showcases how difficult it is for some of our key allies and partners who, on the other hand, are the target of Chinese coercion and aggression, but don't necessarily want to attract more Chinese anger or attract more Chinese aggression.
What does Japan want us to do?
So Japan has been very vocal in denouncing and criticizing China's exercises because, as you've seen, particularly the August 4th exercises, at least 5 missiles that China launched actually fell into Japan's economic exclusion zone. So from Japan's perspective, these exercises aren't just against Taiwan. They are actually imposing costs on Japan. So Japan wants these exercises to stop, and it wants China to de-escalate. The New York Times had a story where a reporter sort of watched the social media reaction to China. And what's remarkable was apparently the government was getting criticized for not being tough enough on Pelosi in Taiwan. What are we to read into that? I think that is exactly what happened. I was on the Chinese version of Twitter, Weibo, the night that Speaker Pelosi was flying to Taiwan, and all the comments I saw on there were incredibly negative against Speaker Pelosi, but encouraging the Chinese government to shoot her down.
Wow.
Of course, the Chinese government did not do that, and then it crashed. Weibo crashed a couple of times. And when it came back on, it was pretty clear that there was some censorship going on, but the Chinese government does not want to engage in some of the more escalatory options that Chinese citizens have proposed. But it showcases generally that there's very strong nationalist sentiment within China, which should or could limit some of the options on the Chinese end to de-escalate without at least demonstrating that they've tried to punish the United States or Taiwan.
So are we to interpret some of this as Xi playing domestic politics ahead of his conference?
Of course. I find it interesting that the measures that China rolled out against the United States, there's 8 of them, a very lucky number in China.
Right.
But, most of the measures, it's not very much.
Interesting. So it really is sort of, it looks like when we see an elected official here try to woo a constituency with talking points. Is that not how to look at this?
It is a little bit of that, but I do think at least 2 of the defense engagements, the Defense Policy Consultative Talks, the DPCT, and MMCA, the Maritime Talks, those are quite critical at this point because those are the talks that help our 2 militaries avoid accidents, set the mil engagements. So the fact that they're canceling these engagements precisely when we need them is very, very unfortunate.
And given all the disruptions to maritime shipping and all of that, doesn't exactly help our current economic situation either with all the supply chain problems. Anyway, Bonnie Lynn, I always feel better educated on these issues when I talk with you. So thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you very much.
Up ahead, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspends an elected state attorney who said he would not enforce the state's abortion law. We're going to talk to that state attorney next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Earlier this week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis publicly suspended an elected state attorney after the Tampa area prosecutor said he would not prosecute people who defied a couple of different laws, including the state's new restrictive abortion law. There was also a law having to do with any sort of medicine having to do with trans kids that are under 18. And now in a press conference, DeSantis justified his move, saying that Andrew Warren flagrantly violated his oath of office and made himself, quote, above the law. Warren pushed back, describing the move against him as a political stunt and illegal overreach. The state attorney's team argues that Florida's new abortion law violates the privacy provision in the Florida state constitution, which, by the way, it is being challenged right now. So I'm joined now by the elected Hillsborough County State Attorney, Andrew Warren. Mr. Warren, I appreciate you coming on.
Chuck, thanks so much for having me.
First, let me start with this. When Florida governors have done this in the past, it has been for different reasons for locally elected officials. There has been a trigger, meaning something happened, right? I want to curious, have you had a case brought to you where you could have prosecuted somebody for violating the abortion law or for violating this trans health law?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
The trigger that started this is the governor's presidential ambitions. This is a political stunt, pure and simple, and it's one that should scare anybody who cherishes democracy and free speech. I mean, this is blatant abuse of power. Mm-hmm. Everybody understands in our country, voters get to elect their leaders. Even my 8-year-old understands that. That's how democracy works.
Let me ask you, do you think if you had actively chosen not to prosecute a case that happened, that he would have been more justified or not?
It's hard to speculate on that because it hasn't happened, right? What we know is that he's not attacking me for anything that I've done. He just doesn't like the way that I'm going about my job and what I'm saying about it. He's trying to take my job away from me for doing my job. Crime is low in the Tampa area. We're protecting people's rights. We're investing in safety. He just doesn't like the fact that I'm not kowtowing to him like everybody else, like all these other lemmings who are jumping off a cliff of freedom in this country and in this state.
What kind of recourse do you believe you have? Is there any other recourse besides going to the state Senate?
Well, we're exploring all avenues right now. I mean, I was totally blindsided by this yesterday. In fact, the governor's announcement of this disrupted and potentially jeopardized 2 39-year-old cold case investigations that were being charged. So we were trying to deliver that justice to victims who've been waiting for nearly 4 decades. Right now, we're looking at our options, whether it goes to the Senate or in courts. We're figuring out what the next moves are so I can continue doing the job that I was elected to do twice.
I was just going to say, what kind of limbo are you in? I mean, you are an elected official. You've been suspended. Does he have the power to actually take you out of this office permanently?
Well, he doesn't, but he doesn't even have the power to suspend me like he did. I mean, this is an illegal suspension. And let's be clear.
Because you didn't do anything. I mean, I guess I keep coming back to the...
Didn't do anything.
Right. It's a political disagreement until, like I said, I go back to, if you had chosen not to prosecute a case before you, arguably, at least he could have claimed cause. There's been no cause yet, correct?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. We haven't done anything. The 2 laws in question, the abortion law has been held unconstitutional. The second law regarding gender-affirming health care isn't even a law in Florida. I mean, this is Orwellian 1984 doublespeak, right? Mm-hmm. He is punishing me for not enforcing a law that doesn't even exist, which is why we need to be clear about this. This is about the governor trying to overturn 2 free and fair elections in Hillsborough County. And it's more than just about suspending an elected official. This is about overthrowing democracy in Tampa Bay.
Do you sense that obviously this is you being used to send a warning to any local state attorney of any blue county, to be frank?
Absolutely. That's what this is. You know, any elected official should now be worried that if they don't say the right thing or they cross the governor in some way and they're somehow interfering with his national aspirations and his obsession to outflank Donald Trump, that they're going to be subject to censure or removal or punishment in some way. This is an illegal move. We plan to challenge it.
And if voters had a problem with you, there are other ways to do this, correct? And they've chosen not to do it.
We call those things elections,
right.
Last I heard.
And there's not a recall, and nobody's trying to recall you. I mean, it does seem as if it's a big government going and trying to tell local government what to do.
It's a great point. I mean, it's been said that government's best when it's closest to the people. The people in Hillsborough County put me here to do the job that I've been doing. If Governor DeSantis has a real problem with how I'm being state attorney and thinks he can do a better job, then he should run for my office, plain and simple.
By the way, did you hear from anybody from the governor's office beforehand? Did they say, hey, we don't like what you said. If you really are going to do this, this could be what we do?
No. And not only that, the governor could have reached out to clarify this statement, he could have listened to what we've actually said. He could have looked at the fact that my statements were not pledges or promises about what I would or wouldn't prosecute. They were value statements, talking about the fact that I was opposing legislation that was violating people's constitutional rights. But again, the governor, this isn't about the job I'm doing. This isn't about crime in Hillsborough County. This is about his political aspirations. That's it.
Andrew Warren, the elected state attorney of Hillsborough County. We will be following this story closely. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective on what happened. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much.
And thank you all for being with us this hour. In case you're wondering, we have a request into Governor DeSantis every week. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.